This is part 107 of SQL Server tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss how to debug stored procedures in SQL Server. First, let's set up the debugger in SQL Server Management Studio. This is the piece of Transact SQL code that we want to debug. Notice here we are calling a stored procedure spPrintEvenNumbers. We have that stored procedure right here. Notice this stored procedure has an input parameter of type integer. If we supply a value of 10 to this input parameter, then this stored procedure is going to print all even numbers starting from 0 till 10. What we want to do is debug this piece of Transact SQL code and the stored procedure that this SQL code is calling, that is spPrintEvenNumbers. To start debugging, you can simply click on this debug button, or from the debug menu you can select start debugging. Notice we also have the keyboard shortcut Alt F5. When you start the debugger, if the debugger fails to start and if you see this error, unable to start T-SQL debugging, could not connect to computer dot, the most likely reason could be that you might have been using dot or local as the server name to connect your SQL Server instance. To fix this error, all you have to do is use your computer name as the server name. So to start debugging, you can use the keyboard shortcut Alt F5 or simply click this button, debug. This is going to start the debugger, and the line that the debugger is about to execute is highlighted in yellow. Now let's look at the different options that are available to step through the code while we are debugging it. So we have these three options: step over, step into, and step out. Now you can see these three options within the debug menu. Notice we also have the associated keyboard shortcuts here. Now let's understand the difference between these three options. Now at the moment the debugger is executing this line number 2, right? So on this line number 2, whether you choose step over or step into, it doesn't really matter. Let's choose step over. Now the debugger is about to execute line number 3. Here we are calling a stored procedure spPrintEvenNumbers. So on this line, if we use step over, then the debugger will not provide us the opportunity to debug the stored procedure line by line. This line will be executed in its entirety. Let's look at that. Look at this. When I select step over, it didn't actually step into debugging the stored procedure line by line. Now let's continue debugging. And let's start the debugger once again. And let's choose step over. Now on this line, instead of using step over, I'm going to select step into. So when we selected step into, the debugger has actually provided us the opportunity to debug this stored procedure line by line. So now I could use either step over or step into and debug each line of this stored procedure. So what is step out then? Now we are debugging within the stored procedure. Now for some reason at this point I have realized that the problem is not within the stored procedure, so I want to step out of the stored procedure. That's when we use step out. Let's actually select that option and see what's going to happen. Look at that, the debugger has finished executing that stored procedure and it's waiting on the next line, that is on line number 4 right here. So that's what these three options does: step into, step over, and step out. To stop debugging, we can either use Shift F5 or from the debug menu select stop debugging. Show next statement. This command is useful to show the next statement that the debugger is about to execute. This is extremely useful when you have several query editors window open and you don't know where the debugger is and the line that the debugger is about to execute. Let's actually look at that in action. So let's start the debugger once again. And let's actually step over and then step into executing the stored procedure. Now let's say we have several windows open here. Now I don't know where the debugger is. At this point, if I want to see what is the line that the debugger is about to execute, I can simply right click and then select this option, show next statement. Now this is going to take me to the line that the debugger is about to execute, which is very useful. Run to cursor. This command execute all the statements in a batch up to the current cursor position. Again, very useful. Let's actually look at that with an example. Look at this right here. We are within the stored procedure debugging and we have a while loop here, right? So I am debugging the while loop. Since this is a loop, it's going to be stuck inside this loop until this condition becomes false. Now let's say I realize that the problem that I'm trying to solve is not within this loop, so there's no point wasting in time executing this while loop until this condition becomes false. Now I actually want to see what happens when this line is executed, right? So I want the cursor to run to that line. Okay, so what I can do is right click on that line and then select this option, run to cursor. So what is the debugger going to do? It's going to execute all this code in the while loop, and then it's going to come right there. So it's going to save a lot of time. So that's what run to cursor does. Locals window, this window displays the current values of variables and parameters. So let's go to SQL Server Management Studio. Here we have the locals window, and look at this. At the moment we are within the context of the stored procedure spPrintEvenNumbers, and if you look at the stored procedure, it has got an input parameter and a local variable start number. So target parameter, its name, its value, and its data type. Similarly, start number variable, its value, its data type. So that's what the locals window does. Now let's say you have closed the locals window. Now you want to bring it back. It's actually present in debug menu, windows, and locals. Watch window. This window is similar to locals window, which is used to watch the values of variables. Now if you want to add a variable to a watch window, simply select that variable, right click on that and select add to watch. So this variable is added to the watch window. Look at this, watch window also display similar data, name of the variable, value, and its data type. Now if you want to add a different variable to watch window, select that and add it to the watch window. Okay, now if you want to delete a variable, simply right click on that and select delete watch. If you want to remove all of the variables, clear all. So watch window, very similar to locals window. Call stack, this allows you to navigate up and down the call stack to see what values your application is storing at different levels. It's an invaluable tool for determining what your code is doing, what it's doing at the moment. Let's actually understand this with an example. Now this is the main query editor window, SQL query 2.SQL, where we have our transact SQL code where the debugging started, and this actually called spPrintEvenNumbers. And to get your call stack window, it's right here. Notice within the call stack window we have our SQL query 2.SQL. Now if I double click on that, it takes me to the window which called that stored procedure spPrintEvenNumbers. Look at that. Within that window, the line which called our stored procedure is highlighted in green, and within our locals window I can actually see at the time when that stored procedure is called, what is the value of this variable target number, its name, its variable, its value, and its data type. And now when we change the context to the stored procedure, look at that, the locals window shows the variables, names, the values, and data types. And here the call stack is showing us who is calling what are their values when those calls are made. At the moment, we only have two windows, but imagine a situation where you have a stored procedure calling another stored procedure, that stored procedure calling another stored procedure, and that stored procedure calling another function. So you want to see who is calling what are the values of variables and parameters at these times. You can use call stack, which is extremely useful for debugging and figuring out what's going wrong. Immediate window, this is helpful during debugging to evaluate expressions and print variable values. And to get to the immediate window, it's right here, and we can use this to print variable values. So here we have a variable start number. If I want to see its value, I simply type it here, press enter. So start number value is 10 at the moment. I can also evaluate an expression here. So I want to see what value I get when I divide start number by 2. The remainder is 0. If you want to clear the contents of immediate window, simply type angular bracket followed by CLS and press enter. That's going to clear the immediate window. Now let's turn our attention to breakpoints. There are two ways to set breakpoints in SQL Server Management Studio. You can do that either by clicking on the gray margin on the left hand side in SQL Server Management Studio. Let's actually continue and let's start debugging once again. And let's step into executing this stored procedure. Now I can set a breakpoint on this line if I want to, simply by clicking on the gray margin right here, or I can use the keyboard shortcut F9. F9 is actually going to toggle the breakpoint. If the breakpoint is already there, it's going to remove that. If it's not there, it's going to set that. Look at this, when I press F9, it toggles the breakpoint. Okay. Now, you also have the option to enable, disable, or delete all breakpoints at once. And you can find those options in the debug menu. Now let's say I want to disable all breakpoints that I have set. I can select this option. Look at that, when I disable a breakpoint, that's how they look like. And if I want to enable them back, I can come and select this option. If I want to delete all the breakpoints, we can select delete all breakpoints, and at that point it's going to throw this confirmation, do you want to delete all breakpoints? When you click yes, it's going to delete all the breakpoints. Now let's look at conditional breakpoint. Conditional breakpoints are hit only when the specified condition is met. These are extremely useful when you have some kind of a loop and you want to break only when the loop variable has a specific value. For example, when the loop variable is equal to 100. Let's actually understand this conditional breakpoint, because this is very helpful in debugging. Alright, now here we have a while loop, right? And obviously when I throw in a breakpoint right here, and when I select continue, it's going to be hit, right? This breakpoint will be hit every time the code comes to that point. So at the moment, start number variable has a value of 1. Now I want to continue. Start number variable is 2. Now actually let's disable that breakpoint and let's continue. So it finishes, and look at this. This stored procedure at the moment has got two problems. It doesn't start from 0 and it doesn't print till 10, right? So let's see where the problem is by debugging it. So I'm going to start the debugger, and I'm going to press F10 and then F11 to step into that stored procedure, and I'm going to enable this breakpoint simply by clicking on that. Now when I press F10 and when that breakpoint is hit, or when I select Alt F5, notice this breakpoint is hit every time, and I don't want that, because what is the problem with the stored procedure? It's not printing 0, and that could possibly be because we are starting this counter at 1 instead of 0. We know that first problem. But the second problem is, it could be right here, because it's printing even numbers until 8. Okay, and after 8 it's not printing 10. So as long as this variable value is 8, it's getting inside this loop and it's doing what it is supposed to do. But when it becomes greater than 8, maybe that's when the problem is. So I want this breakpoint to be hit only when this variable value is greater than 8. Okay, but at the moment, since we don't have a condition on that breakpoint, it will be hit every time. Okay, so to make this a conditional breakpoint, all you have to do is simply right click on that breakpoint and select condition, and then you specify your condition here. Let's actually copy this variable name, and then I'm going to right click on that breakpoint, select condition, throw that in there, and then I'm going to say when at start number is greater than a value of 8, and look at this, is true. When this condition is true, only then hit that breakpoint. So I'm going to click OK. Now look at the plus sign. So that's what tells it's a conditional breakpoint. Now when we select continue from here, look at the value of the variable. So at the moment the value of the variable is 9, which means it's greater than 8. The condition has become true. So that's why this breakpoint is hit. So start number is 9, target is 10. 9 less than 10, true. It's going to come here. And start number is 9. When I divide 9 by 2, let's see what we are going to get. So I'm going to copy that expression, paste it right there, press enter. So we are going to get a remainder of 1. So it's not going to go into that block of code. So let's press F10. So it's going to increment start number by 1. So start number is now 10. Is 10 less than 10? So when I press F10 there, look at that, it's not going inside that loop. So that's where the problem is. The condition has to be less than or equal to. Okay, so this demonstrates the use of conditional breakpoint. Let's continue and fix those two errors. So I'm going to initialize this to a value of 0, and I'm going to change the condition there to less than or equal to, and let's change this code. Okay, so we want that to be within sample db, and now let's execute this code without debugging, and we get the values from 0 to 10. Thank you for listening and have a great day.